Hello. In this video I'm going to be taking you through the whole process of using iPrecision and iPrecision animations together with the EP Recorder app to get the VNG style results. So start to finish we begin in EP Animations. This is the layout from version 3.0 onwards, and we're going to combine it with the EP Recorder app, pair it, make a recording, analyze recording, and then put it back into EP Animations to get the results graph. So what you see here at the top left, we've got the session box where we can fill in a subject ID. We can choose what sort of recording we want to do. So in this case, obviously with the EP Recorder app. And then we've got the button here to pair with the EP Recorder app. So you choose your phone from the list. You'll see my phone here on the right. Go through the steps of pairing. There is a separate video which goes into more detail about this, but what you'll see here, choose your phone from the list and click on pair device, and then on the phone you click on the Wi-Fi symbol at the top right and then click on start pairing, and it will give you a code to fill in on your computer. This code is to ensure that the phone and the computer are talking to each other, that it's not trying to talk to a different phone if another one happens to be connected using EP Recorder app. Maybe in a busy clinic or setting that might be the case. So it's just to make sure that they're actually talking to each other rather than talking to other devices. In some cases, you might already have paired a phone to the computer, or your phone might already be paired to another computer. Very easy, you just have to unpair the device. So there's an unpair device button on both of the apps. If you click that, it should let you just start again. So you fill in the 6-digit code and click the pair button down at the bottom right if you like, keeping the device paired permanently, otherwise for 2 hours. You should get these confirmation messages, and you can close down the pairing dialog. Use the auto record button. I would highly recommend this with EP Recorder. There's not really a reason to have the EP Recorder app if you're not going to use the auto record, so I'd recommend leaving that turned on. You can fill in a subject ID at the top left if you need it. This just gives the file when it's saved a name, so it's easier to find again. And then you want to set the settings you need for your app, for your test, sorry. So the dot size, the kind of test you want to do, whether you want a light background, a dark background, or color dot. In general, when recording with a phone, I recommend using a dark background with a lighter dot. Then you get less reflection from the screen on the eyes, which helps with the analysis of the results. Once you've set your settings, you need to choose whichever animations you want to test. So first at the top, you choose whether to run the calibration or not. Again, for this version, the VNG style results, I would absolutely recommend using the calibration. But maybe if you're just measuring an OPK, for example, doing something different, you don't have to use the calibration. Only really necessary when using pursuits and saccades and gaze holding. If you're not using those, you can always choose to skip the calibration. When you're adding animations to the queue, you kind of start to learn how long each one is. So for example, I've put pro saccades in the queue here. I think from what I can remember, that's 20 saccades. Some people might want to test more, then you can just put it in the queue multiple times, as many times as you like. If you put it in too many times, then just click on remove selected, and I'm going to go back to one for this demonstration. So we've got a queue, we've got everything paired and turned on. When we're ready, we can hit the start animation button, and that will take us into the preview window. Here we have a photo of the setup that I use in my office when I'm recording with EP Recorder. For the photo, the light on the phone was turned off, but otherwise this is how I would do it. The phone's on a tripod. What's that, maybe 5 to 10 centimeters from my face. This would be for 2-eye mode. For 1-eye mode, I'd get it in even closer. It also looks from the photo like the height might not quite be right, that it might be slightly obstructing the view of the dot on the screen, but hopefully you get the idea from this in any case. I always instruct the patient to rest their elbows on the desk and kind of put their fists against their face to reduce head movement. It helps to have a desk which can move up and down. Otherwise, you can always use piles of books or whatever works to get things lined up. Also notice that the screen and the target they're looking at is fairly close to eye level. If they look down too much, then eyelids might close a little, and that can obstruct the pupil. Generally not a problem for the phone, but you don't want them looking down too much with their eyes. Here you'll see we're in the preview window. Again, there's another full video about using this available on YouTube and on the website, but to explain how I'm doing it in this particular case and how I would usually do it when I'm using this version of the app, I tend to prefer one eye mode. Two eyes can be useful. I tend to check the eye movement myself manually to check for conjugate gaze, and if I'm happy that the eyes are moving together, I prefer to use one eye with my testing. Again, I like to have the light on high and the camera usually on 30 frames per second, sometimes on 60 frames per second, and for very specific cases occasionally 240 frames per second. And then it's a question of getting the eye lined up in the preview. So you've got the green circle, and your aim should be to try and get the iris lined up with the green circle. The camera is going to focus on that circle, and that also gives you an approximate positioning for how close into the camera you need to be, and obviously it's good to be more or less in the center of the video. You'll see here I also have a blue marker dot under my eye. I recommend using this whenever you can. This is used for head movement correction, so we'll come back to that later when the video is analysed. But basically what this does, the program will track if that dot moves across the screen, and it will compensate for where the eye has moved. Otherwise you completely lose track of where the eye was at the start. So once you think you've got the eye pretty much lined up, you want to make sure you've got the lighting right. So here it looks nice and centered in the circle. Got a nice black pupil, and you'll see the glint of the torch is right down at the bottom of the pupil. That's what you want to be aiming for, just at the bottom edge, or perhaps even slightly under. In practice, what this means is you want to get your phone down below the eye line and angled up just slightly, so it's shining up towards the eye. Obviously this also helps to get the phone out of the way of the stimulus, the target they're watching on the screen. When you're happy that it's all lined up, click on the green continue button. Once you press the green continue button, the animation should start. You'll see here I'm watching the calibration animation. Recording on the phone starts automatically when the animation starts, and it won't start until it's confirmed that it's recording. It's down at the bottom right, you see a very small green dot. That's showing that the phone is actively recording right now. So we're now into the pro saccades here, saccading from the middle to the side. This is in a quasi-random order in this specific animation to stop the test subject from guessing what's coming up. The bottom right of the screen here you can see what my phone is seeing at this particular moment. So you can see how my eye is attempting to follow the saccade. And what you might be able to see is that my head has drifted down a little bit, and I think actually a little bit closer to the camera as well. So I didn't do a good job of keeping my head still. So that's why the head position marker can become really important. Once the animation finishes, see on that example there, the recording icon changes, the video stops recording on its own, and it will show you this sharing screen where you can choose how you want to share your video that you've recorded with the computer which is going to do the analysis. If you're using an iPhone and a Mac, AirDrop is always the best way to do this. For using an iPhone with a Windows machine, it can be a little trickier. There are ways around it with cables. There's some advice on the website at learn.iprecision.com. If you're using the Android version of this app, I need more testers still, please use the Android version. Then it again needs different ways of connecting it to your computer. It's all possible. Go to the website and there's a few suggestions. If you find another way which works better, please let me know. So once we click on the airdrop button to share it with the computer, then it will start to send the video across to the computer, and once it's downloaded we can move on to the main iPrecision program. The video is downloaded onto my computer. On my Mac it goes automatically into the downloads folder. I think that'll be the case for most people, but you might have to work out where your computer tends to save it. And what we can do is just drag and drop the video file into iPrecision. You can also choose to use the load video button at the top left if you prefer, and that should load the first frame of the video, as you'll see here. Again, we can enter our subject ID. If I can type properly, then something like that. Currently it's on one eye analysis, we'll keep it that way, and then correct my typing problems there, and then we find the start of the calibration. You can recognize the start of the calibration always has a pursuit from the center to the left. So just that first little phase, the eye is going to move to the right on the screen, to the left in real life, and you can use that to start your video. It doesn't matter if you started it a little early, but it's nice to keep it as tight as possible. And then you want to check the end of the video as well, see if there are any unnecessary bits at the end. Shouldn't be the case when you're using automatic recording. You also need to make sure that iPrecision is in the correct mode. So my version of iPrecision here launched in goggles mode. So I switched that over to smartphone mode, which slightly adjusts how it analyzes the video and gives you slightly different settings to use. And what I'm trying to do here is to get the pupil as black as possible with the lightest iris around it as possible. In general, with a phone, that means putting the exposure very low. It can go too low and it starts to become less black because of that. You want to keep it fairly low with the contrast usually very high. The hue slider does a slightly different job. It adjusts the colouring. Coincidentally, for my eye colour, the standard hue is fine. Particularly for darker eyes, it can be useful to adjust the hue, which keeps the pupil black but changes the colour of the iris to get a more clear definition between the iris and the pupil. The clearer the definition and the darker the pupil, the more accurate your results are going to be. So here my hue setting ends up pretty much in the middle. Contrast is pretty much on full and exposure very, very low. And then I turn on the head position tracking, so using that blue dot to make sure that I can correct for any head movement. What you see here, if I look at the end of the video, so using that time slider at the top, the blue dot actually slightly disappears out the bottom of the frame. Ideally, you want to avoid this, having the blue dot visible all of the time. I keep saying blue dot, you can use a different colour, as long as it's a colour which clearly shows up on the video. Having the dot visible all of the time is definitely better. We'll see in the results that this is a little less than ideal what happens here, but it still works. So we checked for the blue dot in the frame there. We're going to mark it using the, we'll mark it in a second. First we want to mark the eye region. So we draw a rectangle where we think the pupil is going to be in the video and click on confirm. And then the program is going to automatically try to detect the pupil. It just looks very simply for a black circle and it will automatically mark it for us. In this case it does that correctly. If not, you can always draw on a new pupil by clicking in the middle and dragging out and then click confirm at the bottom. Once we've selected the eye region, once we've marked it and confirmed the pupil, the program is automatically going to set the pupil threshold. Don't need to go into detail what this is. You shouldn't really ever need to change it. There's another video about it in case it needs adjusting sometimes, but I won't go into detail for now. It gets set automatically based on the pupil that you mark at the start. Once that's all set, we can mark the head position point. So like I said, for this one I'm using a blue sticker. Most colours should work as long as it's clearly differentiated from the skin colour. And I don't think black works, but I'm not sure anymore. That might be possible as well. So a brightly coloured sticker tends to work pretty well. It's also good to have a non-reflective, a matte colour sticker, Otherwise you might get some glints from the torch, and that can also ruin the tracking a little bit. So you can see here the sticker underneath my eye, so I need to mark its position, so I click on the middle and drag outwards. What you'll see here, I'm intentionally starting a little bit high rather than marking the whole sticker, and that's because I've already seen that the sticker slightly disappears out of the frame. Doesn't matter too much, you could mark the entire sticker and it would still try to follow it, but out of experience, I'm leaving off the bottom part in this particular case. Once that's all lined up, the Start Tracking button becomes available, and if we click on that, the video will start to process. And what it's now doing, it's taking that first frame where we marked the pupil, marked the eye area, and it's going to go one frame at a time, looking within specific parameters for what it thinks is the pupil, marking it, recording it, putting it in a video frame, and then moving on to the next frame, every single frame of the video. If you have a 240 frame per second video, obviously this takes a lot longer than if it's a 30 frame per second video, but it'll get there eventually. And then once it's finished processing, you can click on View Results, and we go into this Results view. Again, there's another whole video about this available on my YouTube and on the website. Just quickly go through this specific example. Because we're doing a VNG style test with horizontal saccades, I don't really need to look at the vertical graph, it doesn't really tell us anything, so we tend to go for the horizontal only graph for this. The horizontal graph is then the blue line there, and when it goes up, that means that the eye is moving to the right. When it goes down, that means that the eye is moving to the left. What we can also see on this particular graph, the scale is automatically set from -100 to +100, but I can see where quite clearly looking at it that the eye doesn't move that far. The numbers don't matter too much, it's a pixel measurement rather than anything very specific. But in any case, it's definitely not going further than +70 and -70. So I can go down to this filter section here, set a max deviation of 70, and it will zoom in a little bit on the graph. It will give us a bit more clarity, a bit less wasted space around the edges. So we've got the graph at 70, there's still a little bit of space around, but still looking good there. And we can check that the video has actually tracked in the way we want it to. So if we press the play button here, see the red circle around the pupil, and the pupil moving, the red circle stays right on it so far. And you can also see underneath the green dot on the blue marker, and that's showing us that it's also correcting for the head position. And then if we just check that it's always following the marker drifting out of the frame there, and unfortunately that does mean that the head tracking, the head movement correction doesn't work quite as well as at the start, but we get a pretty good trace of the pupil there. Back to the horizontal only graph, and you can see there's a bit of noise here or a bit of a drift where the head movement correction wasn't working, but generally a pretty good graph. So click on Save Filtered CSV, that saves the file with the filters, and then we can go back to EP Animations and analyze it. So we'll go to the selector down here, select it, open it in EP Animations, and then the program's automatically going to open in another window. Here it is, it opens up the data analysis window in EP Animations for us. It's taken the animations which were still in the queue, and it's also loaded the last saved file that we had down here. Then we check that everything's matching, so we're doing a horizontal movement, not a vertical. As long as everything's matching, we should be able to just click Generate Graph, and it'll give us this results graph. It also gives us this calibration graph, which we can check to make sure it is actually calibrating to the correct points. So we should see from that calibration, so we had the eye moving in a pursuit from the center down to over to the left, and then saccading 4 times over to the right. Those 4 saccades is what the program uses for calibration. So we should see these nice red dotted lines going through the jumps in the graph here. If not, we can use the manual calibration. This one's worked well, so we don't need to do that. Then on this results graph, we've got the blue dotted line showing us the target position, and the green line showing us the actual eye position. most of the time it won't line up entirely perfectly. You'll get this difference like you've got here of the green line slightly above the blue line, slightly under the blue line. Just a bit of head rotation that causes that generally, or a bit of translation or moving closer or further away. But it doesn't quite line up properly, but it will be fairly close. Once we've opened the interactive graph, you'll see we get basically the same kind of graph at the top there, and then there's space to play the video file. For this you need to go to where iPrecision has been told to save your results and choose the video file from that folder, from the same folder as you ran the test. And then it should load into this window here. Depending on your computer, depending on the browser you're using, and depending on the video type, which you can change in the advanced settings in iPrecision. Some videos, some browsers are more difficult about loading, but hopefully you'll be able to load it into this window. And then it will remove the calibration section of the video and more or less line up the timing of the video with a marker on the graph, which you'll see up top. I tend to put the video on medium, then it fits on my screen a little bit better, but that might be different for your screen. And then you'll see the marker moving on the graph across the top, and that more or less lines up with the eye movements you'll see on the video. We can look at details on the video by hovering over it, and we can, if we pause the video there, we can move the graph around if we see that the time is not quite right, if we want to try and correct for the head rotation or translation. We can use these adjustments, shift it around. Not great for like scientific research or anything like that, but it can be useful just to make things a little bit clearer. And if we want to keep the graph for use, maybe saving to a file somewhere, something like that, we can show more options and click on Save PNG. We'll get this fairly sharp PNG version of the graph, which you can save to your computer, which will be saved to the downloads folder in most cases. So that's the end. I hope it's clear. Like I said, there's lots of separate videos explaining lots of parts of this. This was more the overview. I hope it's useful. Please contact me if you have any questions at support@iprecision.com. Thanks.